Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's FileMaker webinar. My name is Mike Crook. I'm the marketing manager here at FileMaker in the UK, and I have with me Kieran Saunders, our FileMaker product specialist.
Good afternoon.
So today's webinar is all built around the FileMaker training series. One's all about relationships, and Kieran will be getting going with that very shortly. Before he does so, I'd just like to say, if you have any questions during the course of the session, feel free to ask them using the questions panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll do our best to address as many of those as we can towards the end. We'll also be running a few polls during the course of the session. Please do interact with those. They give us great feedback, allow us to judge how we're getting on today, and also help us to improve future sessions when we run those. So yeah, please interact with those. So that's all you'll hear from me until we get to that question section later on. So without any further ado, I shall hand over to Kieran to get started. Kieran.
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon again. Let's have a look at the agenda slide. So today we'll be quickly looking at a pre-built solution that comes shipped with a product called the Invoice Starter solution. And that's a good showcase for relationships. So we'll be diving into that and having a look at how that is built up. Then we'll be looking at how you get started quickly with some spreadsheets, just to start looking into how you can create fields, to start working with tables and fields, of course. Then we get into different field control types, how you can display that data. Then we get into the real sort of meat of relationship, which of course is the primary keys and the understanding creating relationships between sets of data in your solutions. And then we show how you sort of show those related records, a couple of ways of actually viewing related records. Okay, so let's get quickly started and let's have a look at the starter solution. So I've already got the starter solution here ready, and I've put some pre-built data in it for you. Just so you know, you can get to it from File New from Starter Solutions, and you can choose invoices there, one of several templates that you can get started with and have a look at. So this is the starter solution. As I say, when you open it up, it will be empty, but you can very quickly, with this little pop-up, put in your customer name and address that will then populate into the invoices, for example, and start using that data around the system. So I'll quickly go over this starter solution, and then we'll dive into some of the bits that make it quite useful to learn from and to use potentially. So one, I suppose, is that pop-up. That's quite a good start, is to learning about pop-ups and some of the controls. Quite a useful way of adding data without having to create another layout. So that's quite a nice component. If we go into the layout mode, it's simply a button control that's up in the top here. It's slightly hidden. You have to hold the button control to get a pop-over button. So once you put the button in, this is obviously quite a large button, but you put the button in, you then got a pop-up area where you can put fields as is in here, and you get this little control panel to control about it. So that's quite a nice little start to the learning about some of the controls in here. So we've got a dashboard is the first bit, a little button that will take you over to the invoice layouts to start creating an invoice. There's some nice charts over here that shows invoices for the year. I haven't opened this up in a couple of months, so I had to go in quickly and create some new invoices, of course, because it's all filtering for this year, and all of the data was for 2015. So we've only got two in here. So we've got top customers, the top products, and some nice little dashboards here about your business as you're running it. You can see everything's in dollars here, but that's very, very easy to change. I'll just change one of them just so you get the idea, but you do the same for everyone. So any component you want to go into there, you can go into the inspector, into the data tab, and down the bottom is the data formatting, and one of those it should be formatted as currency, and you can change that to a pound sign. So nice and easy to change all of those symbols as you go through the solution. Okay, so let's dive into, so we've got several components in here. So we've got the idea of invoices for customers that of course contain the products that you're selling on those invoices. So you'd have to populate some data into all of these before you can get going, of course. So within each of these is a nice filtered list of your customers, and then a detailed screen, so a nice little map there where they work, their website. You can open the website directly and email them directly from here. And then you get two of these areas here that are called portals, but are looking at the related data to this particular customer. So they're filtered by this customer. So you're seeing invoices that are unpaid and paid. So we can see quickly, how much is that they owe us and how valuable this customer is to us. And of course, creating a new invoice is very easy. You can go straight in from here, from this button, and you start going into invoices. Maybe you made a mistake and you want to change the customer, which you can do in here. Nice little filtered list here, so you could potentially change that customer, the dates and summary, and then of course adding line items to that invoice. Again, a nice little filtered list where you can choose those items that you want added to the invoice, quantities that go with it, and of course the amounts totaled with a tax rate that you maybe put on it that then I'll calculate through. Some status, so when they eventually do pay, you can then of course check them off as when they've paid and how they paid, just so you've got some tracking in there. So of course we got printing the invoice, so those details that I said right at the beginning you can put into the solution, and then they're carried through. So when you're creating and printing or emailing your invoice, you can change this. This is just a layout, but then we'll actually send off into an email, or you can print it out and send it that way. Okay. So let's have a look at the some of the nuts and bolts in here, and then we'll come back to some of the fields. So let's have a look and just go into File Manage Database. So actually have a look in how this is built. So of course we've got the idea of within relationships. The reason we call a database a relational database is because it's relating data to other bits of data in a logical way, so that you're not adding that data in twice potentially. So if you have a customer called Mike, he buys a few products, and then a few months later he comes on again. You don't have to type in Mike and his address and all his details in that way. You should have already put them into the system, and you're just attaching this new invoice to Mike. So in order to do that, you've got to split out these bits of data. If you imagine this as a spreadsheet, all of these tables here would be the sheets within the spreadsheet. Within spreadsheets you can have multiple sheets. You don't have to just have one, and usually they're about customers, and then another one will be events or whatever else you're tracking. So we've got the idea of these different objects or people or things that you're tracking data about. In this case, it's customers and their data and invoices. So they're called tables. Then we've got the fields. So the fields being the columns in a spreadsheet, but they're the sort of data points that you want to collect about that object or thing, so customers in this case. So of course we've got the company name, the first and last name, details about their address, and some other sort of fields in here that help in calculating some business data. You can swap between these sort of different objects at the top here, so you can have a look at the orders and products and so on, and have a look at how it's built up. So that's that side. So those are the sort of the pieces, if you like, and this is where it all comes together in the relationship tab along the top here. Here we have, sort of ignoring this bit, this dashboard is obviously for helping with the dashboard view, but we have customers. If we work this way, we have the customers that have many invoices. The invoices have many data, invoice data lines, so the sort of lines on the invoice, and they have products. So obviously the product data flows into the invoice line gets attached to a invoice, and the invoice gets attached to a customer. So we can see here that we have, when we look at these lines here, see they've got every single one of these relationship lines has a square, which allows you to go in and look at that relationship in more details. And we'll be getting in, there's a bit more of a keynote I've got that will explain some of these terms, but just so you can see it straight away, we can see how this one, for instance, is matching an invoice ID to an invoice ID. So it's filtering when this number is equal to this number, and dragging that data through, and that's pretty much relationships in a nutshell. But we're going into a much more detail of how that works. Okay, so let's come away from this starter solution. Let's just start from scratch, if you like, and see how you can build up using your own data. So I assume maybe you have some data in a spreadsheet, and you can drag that into FileMaker and create your own file. Now I'll just open up. Just open up that spreadsheet for you, just do a quick view, and we can see it's a pretty standard spreadsheet where you've got the top line has the labels for the bits of data, so address, city, and so on, and then the data goes underneath. So it's a pretty standard one. So that means that on this first option here, I can choose field names. The first row in the spreadsheet will be used to name the field, so it's great. So FileMaker will start. Let's call it customer example and just drop that onto the desktop, and that will bring in all of that data from that spreadsheet into FileMaker. It's created those tables, that one table for me, and it's also created the field names for me and brought in the data as well. So pretty nice. So if I just go manage database, we can see now that we've got one table. It's called customer example because it's taken the name of the file that I called it, but I can rename that and just change that name. So it becomes up my customers table, which is great. All of the fields in there, and again, it's tried to analyze the data to see, whether it's a number, whether it's text or date or so on. So it's tried to do that as well. Of course, you can go in here and change the type if you realize actually it is a date and it's not recognized it correctly. You can change that here. Very important to get that sort of the types of data right at the beginning. But if in doubt, choose text. And again, we'll be going over a bit more detail into that in a minute. So I've got one table in here. That's great. So let's bring in the other one that I had. I'm going to file import, and this time I'm going to choose the orders table that I've got. Bring that in. So this is a slightly different file, dialog box, sorry. On the left-hand side here, we've got the Excel name. So this is the Excel sort of spreadsheet on the left-hand side, including its columns. So these are all the columns on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, the target is where do you want to put it into FileMaker? Well, I don't want it to jumble up into customers. I want to create a new table. And again, it's just going to give it the name of the spreadsheet. This can change. You can change that after the fact. And the target fields, it doesn't recognize what it's going to be, so it's just doing F1 to F6. But again, the spreadsheet is very similar to the customers one in that the top row contains the field name, so I can get FileMaker to build that for me, which is great. And obviously the import action is to add those new records. So fantastic. So I've got nearly 1,500 works orders in here now, and it's created a layout for me called works orders. And I can go and change this layout. It's called it layout 1, but I can call that customers, which is fantastic. So now I've got 3. One is the layout is just table view, so it's just showing me it in a type of spreadsheet. I could either delete that or change its name. But I've got customers and I've got works orders. So I've got 2 bits of layouts. Looking at that data, I can search, I can view them all, I can do a lot of things with them just as they are, but they are at the moment unrelated. If I go to File Manage Database, we can see that they're unrelated. So let's look at coming back to let's go back to a presentation and just go over some theory, if you like, before we start going into how and why you would do that. Okay, so let's analyze the fields themselves first, and then we'll go into the relationship bit. So every field must have a data type, the type being the ones in that image there, so text, number, date, time, timestamp, and container. So this allows FileMaker to decide how best to store and treat that data, and it gives you power to analyze it and use functions to do more intelligent stuff with that data. So for examples, why you would change it and why it's important is that the sorting changes depending whether it's a text number or date field. So of course, if you're sorting you want it to sort by date, if it's just text, FileMaker won't be doing it in a very intelligent way, not exactly as you imagine it to work. So you have to get the type right. So text is the kind of default, if you like. Most things will go into a text field. So it's always sort of the if you're not sure, use text. And the sorting, of course, is going in a textual way, not a numeral way. So it'll sort 1 and then 1, whatever else is after that, in order, and then 2 instead of 1, 2 to 10, as you would in numerical order. So just as an aside, you can store over 2 gigs of actual characters within it. So within one field, you can store huge books worth of text just within one field, within one record. So the other type, numbers, again, pretty obvious, but it has to be numeric, of course, to go into here. And so therefore you get sorting with that way, and you can use mathematical calculations. Trying to do adding a first name, last name together won't get you the same answer as if you had it obviously typed as a number field. That's number fields. So date fields. Any date between the first year of 0001 and above, and you can enter date in an unacceptable format, and you'll get an error. So there's a bit of just giving a date type. You'll obviously get an error if you're typing in text, just text there. And dates, when you work out a date, they're working out as the number of days elapsed since FileMaker believes time began, which is the 1st of the 0001. So the other data type that's very, very interesting and pretty unique to FileMaker in the way it handles it is called the container type. And this is any data that can't be represented as text. So images, video, signatures, music, lots of other stuff like that can be stored within a container file. So you can include any file in there. So even a very old file, maybe you have working on a CAD CAM and it's very, very old sort of data type or whatever it may be, FileMaker can store it absolutely no problem. We try and display it nicely within the layouts like you may have seen for sort of images and videos. The way I try and explain it is if you can see it if you just open it up within an Internet Explorer or Safari and it will show it like an image or a video, we can probably display it because we're using web technology in that data field in that field at that point. So then I notice that we can store 4 gigabytes of data within that one field within the database, but FileMaker's come on quite a bit in that we can store data in a container, sort of controlled by the container, stored externally, so we can store that on the server. So it just depends how large your hard drives are. So there's theoretically no limit to how high we can go there. So we've already done the import, but let's have a look at just more detail on the file that we're building and how that all comes together. So let's do a bit here, and so we'll go into File Manage Database again. And we can see here, even if you can sort of see the data here on the left represented. So we've got works order number. So there's a unique number here that's against an order, which is correct and right, and within the customers table, we've also got a unique number for the customers that's represented here in the works orders table. So we can see here we've got customers number here, and then on the right hand side in works orders we've got the works order primary number, the unique number, and we've got the customer number as well that links back to the customer. So in this case, works order, what is that? 13 or 130,000, no, even more, quite a large number there. This number here reference back to customer 9, and they will be stored in this table. So just by linking these two tables together, we could go on the customers table and only find their works orders where the customer number is 9 and link back, filter out all of the other works orders, all sort of nearly 1,500 of them, but only see the ones that are relevant for that customer. So that's the kind of mechanics of it within FileMaker's relationship graph. Let's go see how you actually sort of represent that. So I'm going to go and base myself on customers. If I go into the layout mode, I'll show you what I mean by that. Every layout has to be based on a table that's sitting in the relationship graph. So in this case, customers. So it sort of works from there outward. So we've linked customers to orders. So we're on customers. We could put a control here, and we will, called a portal to view all of those related works orders, and it will filter based on the table that you're basing this layout on. So that's an important point. Every layout is based on a table, or at least a representation of a table in that relationship graph. So just bear that in mind. That's quite an important first point. So I'm going to go up into the toolbars here and look at the portal tool. And I'm going to draw that on, the size I want it to come in. And show related records from is the first question. Now, if nothing was highlighted there, you'd very quickly know that you hadn't done your relationship right. You could always go into the Manage Database part from here and go and fix it. But it looks like it's working okay. So we've got works orders. That's great. And I'm going to keep it as default just so you can see what it's going. It's choosing initial row 1 to 13 because of the size of the box that I drew. That's also fine. So let's do that. And the next dialog is, what do I want to add into this portal? What do I want to see? It's a very limited space here, so you can't see as much as a whole layout, of fields. So you usually choose a subset. What's important? Well, I want to know. I want to know who did it, the date, and maybe the hours, and that's all I want to know. I don't even want to know the description or know what went on. I just want to know, the general information to then go and view that in more detail. So let's see what that looks like. So I'll edit that and save. So we can see this related data is flowing in now, and it should be different for every customer. Yeah, which is great. There you go. You can see a limited set there. But as we go to another one, I don't know. I'm going up and down. There's no way of making this data move. So if I go into layout mode and just double click on this object again, one of the options in here is to allow vertical scrolling. And the option that I particularly, the sort of how it works is when scrolling, I like that functionality, that sort of look feel. If I show you both. So scroll bar, I'll show you what that looks like. So scroll bar's on the right hand side. It's taking up some room within this object, and you can see it all the time, and you can see where you are. So that's one sort of look feel, if you like. The other is when scrolling, allow vertical scrolling when scrolling, which is much more of a Mac OS type look feel. You can see the scroll bar is there, but it disappears when you're not scrolling. I personally like that better, but so there's two little options in there to see your related data, so you can go down and view all your data. So let's look at a few other options, and then we'll talk more about the mechanics of relationships again. So what other options have we got in here? Well, one is to sort the portal. So as I was saying, let's sort by date. Let's see how that looks. There you go. We can see we're sorting by date now. So we've got our oldest jobs at the top, youngest at the bottom. Of course, we could change that to be descending, and then we get a different result, of course. So our newest jobs at the top, maybe that's more important to us. So several options on there. We can see that related data. Okay, let's look into the field types and see with a bit more detail in there. So if I just go into manage the database again, I'll look into these fields now. At the moment, because we've just imported it from the Excel, we've just got the type is just a number, which is okay, and that's correct. But it's not something called a primary key, and I'll go into more detail on the spreadsheet. But it's not an auto ID. It's not adding, keeping it unique. So what I could do is I could go and click the box to have a serial number. Because we've got data in there at the moment, I have to go in and find out what the highest value is for the next value to create it. So a very simple way of doing that is just to go to the customers, go to the end, and we can see I've got 47 customers. So a very quick way of doing this would just be to go into the customer number and say, okay, I want to start, next value is 48, and increment by 1 going on, and on creation. So every time I create a new customer, that will start working. So if I add that, and then I add I go and add record, new customer, you can see that my customer number is incrementing automatically. I've obviously got no orders. I can start typing in their details, but every time I create a new customer, I will get a new number in here. Now, my recommendation is that you shouldn't leave this on the form. This shouldn't really be part of the solution because, of course, look, I can go in there and delete that number. That's not what you want because you'll be linking this bit of data. So there's a couple of ways to make that unique and force that to always be unique. Again, back into a file managed database, if you double click on that field, you can go down to the bottom here and prohibit modification of value during data entry is one way of doing it. So let's see the effect there. So if we add a new customer and we try and change it, FileMaker will bring up an error to say it's not modified. Obviously, the other way of doing it is to delete the field from the form, and then it's not there. But FileMaker is still putting that number in there and still generating that primary key. So let's just go back to presentation before we go any further, and just let's explain what I mean by some of these sort of types. Let's just, if you don't mind, we'll just go to a quick poll and see where we've got with some of these questions. And see what else I need to start concentrating on. It helps me as well. So if you don't mind, I'll just launch a quick poll. So which types of fields can you create? We've gone over some of them. Okay, 70% of you voted. I'll just close that poll and share that. Absolutely, all of those. So text, date, container, and number, just some of the types of field that you can create to track some of your data. So a question about the container fields I was talking about. What type of information could be stored in the container fields? Okay, tricky one, that one. I'll just close that poll, share those results. So the really correct one is any type of file. We can put FileMaker files into it, we can put PDFs, and we can put video and audio. We can put any file into a container. It doesn't. It will just contain those for you. Okay, well, a couple more questions for later, but after we've just gone into a bit of details about the theory of a relational database. So FileMaker is a relational database. It helps you create custom apps, but in order to do that, and why it's so powerful, it's just not the forms, it's just not the front end, and it's not just a scripting language. It just doesn't allow you to do some pretty amazingly powerful things with the scripting language, but it is actually a database system sitting at the back end to store that data that you're generating and working with. So it provides a way to relate two or more sets of data in order to reduce, like I was saying, double entry, adding information in twice. And that just really, really helps improve the consistency of your data. I'm sure you like, even today, you might have received a spreadsheet that someone asking you to fill out some data that you're then emailing off again. There's potentially 3 or 4 copies of that floating around with different people, and this is the kind of thing that FileMaker helps reduce within your business. So let's look at two of the most common types of relationship. One is the first one, is a one-to-many. So using examples is almost the only way to explain this theory. So if you imagine a farm and you want to track information about the farm and the things on the farm, one of them being cows, or maybe it's a cow farm, so it's the only thing, you would have a farm. One farm has many cows, or if you look the other way around, many cows belong to one farm. So that's written with a line that designates the one, and then you have the little crow's foot there, just coming off the cow, which is the many. So that also is represented in FileMaker in the relationship graph. So the way you get the one on the one side is the field that you're linking with would be an auto ID, a serial number, and then FileMaker would recognize that's a unique record as only one of those things when you're doing a relationship. So on the farm, you would probably be linked by farm ID, let's say, and it would be linking to a field in cow, which would be farm ID, but that would be the many. It would just be a number field, and you'd be plonking that farm ID into it. So the next type of relationship is a many-to-many. So we see this in real life all the time. For films, for example, it'd be very boring if there was only ever one movie or one actor. Of course, there's lots of movies and lots of actors, and they all interact together. You have many actors playing on a movie, in many movies over their career. And again, you have many movies with actors in it. So it's both ways. Actually, I have to explain James Bond because we have Warner Brothers as one of our customers in the UK. This is a European arm of Warner Brothers, and they were dealing with James Bond, not just from a sort of production but also distribution sort of point of view. Amazing company. So that's why the James Bond is there, just to explain. So a sort of database term to introduce you to is something called keys. Keys are basically fields in a database, but the primary key is the auto ID, is the field in the database that makes that one record, that one thing, unique and lets you link to it. So it's recommended, I think it's pretty much vital, that you create a primary key in every table. So every table, even if you're not linking, it's always just good practice to put a primary key in there with that serial number as I just showed, so that you can have uniquely identify that record. And the primary key has a few rules. There's actually something silly like, I can't even remember now, maybe even up to 20, but there's certainly more than I can remember. But the first 3 are the really, really vital ones, and that is that it has to be unique, pretty obvious. You're trying to uniquely identify something. This value needs to be unique. It shouldn't ever change in the life of the system, and it should never be empty. All those things pretty much make sense, but it's amazing how they take some thought, even though they on the surface seem quite simple to understand. The uniqueness is one, definitely. In my view, you should never ever use any kind of number or value that is actually used in real life. So for an example, maybe if you're building a student system, you sort of say, what should I use for students to uniquely identify them? Yeah, let's use the student ID, which is, they get given at the start of their student life. And that may make sense, but it's actually a value that's used in real life, and just sod's law, something will come along that will change that student ID. The university will change their sort of practices. They'll emerge with another university, whatever may happen. But you'll then need to do some work in your system because that new value might change and may have some consequence in your system. So my recommendation is that the primary key, even if you think you have an absolute unique bit of data that links to this object, this student in this case, you should just use a number that has nothing to do with in real life, and you just let Pharmica generate that number. Is my recommendation. And obviously, so that sort of follows the last point. It's good practice for our Pharmica Pro to create a primary key. We've got functions in there that will do that rather than coming up with your own calculation to do that. It's just good practice. Let Pharmica Pro take care of all that for you. So the other one is the one that the primary key is linking to. So in the case of the farms and the cow, the primary key is the farm ID in the farm table where you're tracking all the farm details. The foreign key is in the cow table. So think about it that way. So when you're assigning a cow to a farm, you would put the farm ID into that record to link back to the farm. So it's called a foreign key. It's just a number or a text field, nothing more technical than that. That's all it is. It's just literally for linking back through the relationship. So the last point I think is relevant. It's changing sort of the situation, but when thinking about a one-to-many relationship, the many side will always contain the foreign key or needs a foreign key in it. In the equipment rentals file, which comes with the FTS basics when you download it, the asset table requires a customer foreign key, so you can link back to who has this asset. Well, it's that is the number that goes back to the customer table with all the details of the customer. Okay, so primary and foreign key, you need both. So just to possibly confuse matters, but I've shown you a method where you just use the auto-enter serial number and it just is 1 plus 1. You can get a bit more complicated than that, but that's more than adequate. It's a unique value. The trouble is we live in a new modern world, mobile world, sorry, where people are using devices, iPads and laptops, and they're going offline. They literally are going into the underground. So how do you create a record when you're down in the underground? There may be 10 of your colleagues down in the underground, all creating new records, but they're all going up by 1. If the last value they sort of realized was 5, they're all going to be getting 6, and the system will break. So you need some way of generating a number when you're offline, you're not connected to the server, and the server takes care of all of that for the clients. It will tell them you now need to do 7, you now need to do 8. They don't have that online connection. Well, we've come up with a function called a UUID, a universally unique identifier, easy for me to say, which is just an incredibly long character string. I mean, 16 bytes doesn't seem that long, but the combination is just more than we need in the business situations that we're going to be building for. Possibly if you were talking about a bank with billions of transactions, that possibly wouldn't be long enough. You need a longer one, but again, a bank system wouldn't be offline down in the underground, so it's probably not going to be a problem for them. But that key is just gives you so many options, so many different unique values, it's never going to overlap. So every time you generate this primary key using the get UUID calculation, it will generate a random number that is just so random that you're never going to get the same value. So very, very useful when you're going offline and then you want to sync these new records that you've created, these new jobs you've done offline, and sync them back to the server. So something just for you to be aware of. This is when you're usually talking about mobile type work. The get UUID is becoming more popular in the Pharmica community to just do a standard. It's there, why not use it? And that's something that you can take on board. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at this relationship again with fresh eyes. Now that you've looked at, you've got some of that theory under your belt. Let's go back to the practical and see what we did, and just recap very briefly. So we brought in 2 sets of data. The data had, the spreadsheet obviously had data in it. So we created the tables using an import. It came with fields that was obviously being used in a very manual way, but they were relating customers with a primary ID with a unique number. They were maybe doing it manually, maybe using a spreadsheet to do it. Every time they did a new customer, they were creating a serial number that was then linking to another sheet that was the works orders, but they were linking using this number. So they were cutting and pasting or drop downs this number 1, number 2, whatever it may be, into the works order and putting it into the foreign key. So this would be the foreign key in this, and again, this would be the one-to-many. So you can see as we, when we first did this link, there was crow's feet on both sides. Once I created the customer number to be, or changed it, sorry, to be a auto number to be a serial number, FileMaker recognized that, and you can see there's just a 1 line on there, just a line to specify that it's a 1, and on the foreign side we can see that it's got a small crow's feet there. It's a bit small, but hopefully you can see that. So we can see that's a one-to-many. So one customer has many works orders. Yeah, so that's the basic building blocks for all of this. Let's go and just do a few little other bits on the portal just to show you what else you can do with the portal when you're showing this data. Just go back to one with some data in there. So there's one limitations with this portal tool is that it doesn't auto-create the labels, which can be confusing. A little trick I've got is if you double-click on a field, you can hit this Create Label tab, and it sort of creates it to the left-hand side. You could just drag it up to the top there and continue to do that for the few that you've got. You've usually only got a few, so it doesn't take too long. And you can do that for the labels, which is a nice quick way of doing it. Okay, so we've now got labels. At least now we can sort of see what our data is displaying, which is great. What else can we do in the portal? If we double click on the portal, we can also filter the portal. So say we only want to see a year's details in there. I haven't got data in here, a lot of data for this year. So let's go and see how we can filter that. So we can filter it based on when it's true. So the calculation I've got here is let's look at I want to look at the year. So there's a function in FileMaker called year that, if I bring in, will turn a date and just take out all of the other data and just leave the date, the year in there for me. So if I double click on the date here, fields on the left, functions on the right. I should have explained that already within the tables. So let me start again so you understand that. So I'm searching for some kind of function to help me out. The one that I've decided on is year, that will turn a date in the middle and just strip out everything else and just leave me the year. So what I want to find is last year's. But let's get the year from all of the data in that portal in this case. Okay, and then I want to say when it equals, and I could just put 2015 in there as a hard value, but maybe to make it a little bit more dynamic, I could just always have it going the year back, the past year. So again, I'm going to use the year functionality, but in this case, I'm going to use another get functionality, which is get current date. Double click on that. So that's going to get me the year that's this current date, but that is going to be 2016. If I just -1 on that, let's see how far that gets me. No, that didn't work first time. Let's try again. I'll just wrap that all in. Let's see how that works. No, I didn't get that last time. I had trouble. One tip, actually, the reason I sorted this out, I've got it saved in a Pages document, but what I did last time was to use one of the tools in FileMaker Advanced, which is the data viewer, which I find very useful doing this kind of thing. So you're trying to test out a function or a calculation that's not working. You can see I already did it there, but you can go into the Watch tab and you can add a value. And you can just add a value, obviously, but you can also start doing some of this calculation within here, and you can evaluate it straight away, so you don't have to go into browse mode and layout mode. So I could put in some of this in here. Unfortunately, you don't get the type ahead in here yet. I'm sure that's being worked on. So get current date, and you can evaluate it. Oh, I forgot the get. That's great. And then -1, 2015, perfect. And then you can copy that. I copy that into the clipboard, and then going into the filter portal, I can put that on that side of the equation. Just bring that out and see if that works for me. Perfect. Okay, so I should find now that I only have values in there that are 2015, and so I can just see a subset of that data. So you can obviously use your imagination of where and how you could use that. You could filter actually through the relationship. I'm going to manage the relationship. You can filter within the relationship. You could add multiple details on here. I haven't got all the details set up, but you could maybe add a date. Imagine postcode as date on the other side. You could then filter where date is greater, or just change that. Just imagination, that's date. So where the customer equals the customer, then the date in the customer's table is greater than the date in the works orders. So you can also filter a little bit through the relationship, but this filtering via the portal gives you a lot more power because you're accessing the calculation engine here. So you've got all of these different functions in here to really go to town to get exactly filtering exactly your data that you need. Okay, so I think that was mainly what I wanted to cover. Let's just make sure. Yeah, I think so. So let's just go to quickly go to another poll and just make sure that I've covered everything. So what are the two most common types of relationships? Okay, lovely. I'll just share those results. Yeah, one-to-many and a many-to-many. The people that chose one-to-one, it is out there. You can use it. Actually, if you go through some of our performance white papers, there's some interesting sort of details around how just doing a one-to-one. So maybe a customer has notes, and you would normally just put notes fields in a field within that customer table. But notes usually just does have quite a lot of data in there. You can have quite a lot of data and pictures, for instance. But if you break that out into a one-to-one relationship and you don't show that notes field unless you explicitly go to allow it to show it, FileMaker isn't bringing that down the network from the server. And there's some quite big performance benefits for doing one-to-one relationships. But certainly the most common one is a one-to-many and a many-to-many. So we've gone over. And just through best practice, what field should you create in every single table within your custom app? Lovely. Absolutely. Everyone got that. Look at that. Perfect score. Yeah, absolutely. And again, my recommendation is never to make that field reference anything in real life. Put that customer, that student ID field we were talking about, make that just a normal field within your table. Absolutely, you should track it. You need it to track it against that student. But it shouldn't be the building blocks of your relationships. That primary key should be just something that you're letting FileMaker generate. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, guys. Just go to the keynote and just wrap up a little bit, and then we'll go to questions, and you can fire over your questions. So we've got a FileMaker Experience Day. We haven't done one in a while, so unfortunately I won't be able to be there, but my colleagues are all very excited to set up in the college in Reading there, meet and greet you. We bring along some of our most experienced developers, our platinum developers as we call them, business partners. They come along They're there to meet and greet you, and also to run some of these sessions. So you're actually getting some training from some of the best minds in the UK around FileMaker, and all for £69 for the day, which includes a lunch. So you can't say fairer than that. It's a really good day. A lot of great feedback from this session. It is aimed at people new to the platform, but I've seen people that have used FileMaker over the years, but maybe haven't developed. So they're just really interested. They used FileMaker in their businesses, but they want to come along and discover how to get going with building it. You're certainly not going to come out with one day of training becoming a FileMaker expert, and that's not the point of this. But it is to give you some foundation work, hands-on. We use the actual computer labs there, so you get some good hands-on there. James Ducker is the chap in the picture there. He runs the first session on planning, and that's really good. It's an excellent sort of bit of knowledge from his experience out in the field of how you start to look at a new custom solution, a new business that's going to run your company potentially. It really gives a very good informs you about that planning stage of the life cycle of your app. So really worth coming along, and like I say, we as a team hope to see you there. So I've put this on the handout. One of the handouts in your control panel, you should have seen this already, is a white paper. It is extremely technical. It does go into a lot of detail, but I put it there just for those of you maybe who already know a bit about relationships and want to just read up about the different techniques, or the different methodologies, I should say, of how you could start off your relationship model. There are different ways of doing it, of course, like all things in FileMaker. So this nicely explains some of the ways to do it, and the pros and cons of all. The other bit that I would recommend, if that's not you're reading that and it's totally over your head, is to go and have a look at our FileMaker Training Series Advanced book. It's around about the £10 mark. It's not a huge investment for a really great training series. This is again written by some of our top FileMaker minds in this case in the US. It comes with videos and files to work along with. Lots of chapters in there. I think 13 now, but one is on relationships, one's on planning, reporting, calculation, scripting, and step-by-step guide. So it's a huge book when you print it out, but it's great in a PDF format that you can search for what you want, and it really is the start off point for most people. Certainly me and my colleagues have all started out going through this manual, and then on to other training courses and so on. But it's a great start. So if you're looking for a bit more information about relationships, I think this should be your first step. And if you want even more, if you've absorbed all of that and you want even more, one of our training partners in the UK is Transmedia. They've been with us for an awfully long time. I hazard to say how much, but I think they're certainly our oldest partner. Nick there is the head developer and owner of Transmedia. Really, really fantastic, nice guy. They've got offices in London and in Bristol, so go check out their website for some of the courses that they run, and expand your knowledge that way.